Thank you very much. So, sustainability's been around for a long, long time. It's gone through so many iterations since I was a junior high school and my science teacher was telling me we got to plant trees to stop the next ice age that's coming. And then it became global warming. And when all of those never occurred, we just decided to end the conversation and say, it's just going to change. So who drove the newest iteration? Was it the consumers? Because in the last 20, 30 years, they've had access to the internet and information about their food systems that they'd never had before. And as Billy was talking about, and we hear it time and time again, there's a lot of that information out there relative to the checkoff conversation that it's not the right information. It's ideologically driven, like the Lancet report. That was ideologically driven, but it was accepted by the UN. Or was it the corporations? And in this I'm talking about not the retail side, not the McDonald's that we buy our burgers at, not the Walmart that we buy our grocery bags from. Well, in Colorado, you can't get grocery bags anymore, can you? I'm talking about the corporate side, where you have major investors that, because their belief is that beef is a bad environmental choice, that they want the major corporation to make a substantive change, or they're going to go invest somewhere else. Or is it the animal activists? And these aren't the only ones that are involved in it. There's others, but these were the two that I put in this slide, that they have driven their ideology. And all of these come back around. And I would submit to you that it's all of the above and more that have brought this sustainability question to us. And thank goodness, Chip, I agree with you. Thank goodness that the National Cattlemen's Beef Association in 2015 supported standing up a US Roundtable for sustainable beef. Because were it not for that, who would have been at the table when these discussions were moving faster and hotter over greenhouse gas emissions, land and water use, land conversion, and others? So in the beginning, we had about 90 members. And in our first year, we tasked ourselves working with Marty Matlock from the University of Arkansas, facilitating the process of picking 6 major issues that are key to the beef industry, but seem to be key to consumers and society. And so you can see the 6 that we chose was animal health and well-being, air and greenhouse gas emissions, efficiency and yield, employee safety and well-being, land resources, and water resources. And remember, this is full supply chain. This is pasture, like so many of us are, raising calves on pasture and working with McDonald's, Burger King, Walmart, and others. We engaged the entire supply chain, but we did further than that. We engaged academia. We engaged our supporting industries like Merck, Elanco, and others. And we also included environmental groups. If we're going to take on that animal, that elephant in the room called greenhouse gases, we wanted those organizations that might question us to be at the table, voice their opinions, voice their differences with us at the table. So we were pretty much inclusive of everybody that had a stake one way or the other in it. And so going through the definitions of land resources and how it applies to us as producers, we'll keep it in the producer sector for the most part. We'll let the retailers do their own thing. But our key element of land resource management and making a difference in land is grazing management plans. And this is a sample of a grazing management plan that we have for ourselves. We use it also on some of our leased operations, and it qualifies for NRCS EQIP. But you notice that we've got it set up so if we wanted to calculate AUMs, we just put the numbers in there and do the calculation within the cell. Or we can use it like this, where it just designates where we were in that month and how many weeks in that month we were in there. It doesn't worry about numbers. But what we read this year over year when we look at the differences at it and plan 2024 and 2025 grazing is, where were we not? The white cells, especially during the breeding, calving, and weaning part, that's our growing season. That's the critical part that we want to see how much of the ranch is getting how much rest. And for us, in our operation, rest is critical. And that's what drives every positive thing with grazing management on native prairie is the rest period. We don't worry much about our grazing period. Some say, well, do you take half, leave half? Well, yes and no. Sometimes we take a quarter and leave 3/4. Sometimes we take 3/4 and leave a quarter. It's a dynamic annual process that gets adjusted no matter how much you plan in January for it. I promise you, you will be making adjustments in it and making critical management decisions, and it's okay to take it hard one year in one place and not so much in another place, and then next year just don't do the same thing twice. So it's a dynamic process that we try to create a really resilient, robust carryover of forage in our operation. A major discussion within the roundtable as we were discussing the land resource was where does generational transfer or succession fit in here? And our philosophy within our family and within Colorado Cattlemen's and to that matter within the US Roundtable is we want working lands in working hands. And first we want it in families because families have invested interest when they're on the ground working there. Second, if you can do some sort of creative management with a young couple, with people outside the family till family can come back around, there is a plethora of techniques to keep working lands in working hands. But like I said, primarily we want to keep families on the land. They're important to the community that they're in. Water resource is also under a grazing management plan for the live animal part of the sector. We can do a lot with our grazing management to hold what falls, especially in the western 2/3 of the United States. When it finally falls, we want it to stay where it is. We don't want it running off, eroding our pasture land, but then also putting sedimentation into the downstream water flows. So that's a quality factor. It's a quantity factor on our ground that we hold it where it falls, because that's where we're going to grow grass from, that's where we're going to bank moisture in our soil from. The other factor for us in so much of the western U.S. is invasive species, and one of the worst is tamarisk. Not only, it's probably a net zero in terms of water quality, what tamarisk removes from the water basin. When you pull tamarisk out, you get cottonwood regeneration, but you also get willows coming in. So I really think tamarisk is a net zero on water quantity, but quality. It is a plant that turns the soil pH, and as that rain comes and washes that soil surface off into the river, then you change that water to a higher pH. And so by removing tamarisk, you improve quality for your downstream people. The other factor in our part of the world is pinyon juniper. We've got areas that Joy and I, in 1974, when we started working for the family, when we started doing some clearing in 2005, we doubled carrying capacity in pastures that we cleared pinyon juniper out. East of us, it's a different form of cedar. It's a different form of browses that come in, but just about everywhere, everybody is fighting the encroachment of some sort of woody element that wants to come in and take your pastures from you. Animal health and well-being. And pre-COVID, the Roundtable had a general assembly, and a company called Miden came in and gave us our first update on consumer perception of the beef industry and that. And as people poll, they'll do two things. They'll ask unprompted questions, then they'll come back and they'll kind of tell you a little bit about it, and then they'll ask you prompted questions, meaning, did you learn anything from that? In their pre-prompted portion of it, when they ask the consumers, what's the most important element that influences your beef choice? And at that time, it was the environment. And remember, that was when all those reports were coming out that vilified beef as being a major greenhouse gas contributor, that we were causing deforestation in South American countries. They lumped it all on the U.S. farmer and rancher's back. Everything they could think of, they lumped on it. Well, the consumer heard it. They believed it. 2022, we asked them to come back when we were in Charleston, South Carolina, and give us an update. And same situation, same question. Animal welfare was number one by a factor of 7% over environment. They love our product. They still have huge confidence in all of you out there and what you're doing. You have some of the highest credibility short of firemen and policemen. They love our product. But They just want to know that from the time it's born and when they're on pasture and as they move through the process, that we take the measures to make sure that it's and I hate to use human attributed terms to livestock, but quality of life, that there's a quality of life. That's important to them. That turns out to be a relatively easy one for us to do. We're so far ahead of that question. It's just how are we going to tell the consumer what we're doing? We don't very often talk about those things to them. It's more the iconic cowboy moving cows and things like that. But that's going to be an easy message to get there. Within our industry, this is one of my pet peeves, because when I came home from college in 1980, we were still doing cesareans on Hereford-based cattle, crossbreeding and AIing, and the only place we could get semen was out of Europe. ABS was just standing up, and a couple others were just standing up. We had not got birth control in continental breeds, so we were still doing cesareans on the ranch. And my experience with that has made me a huge believer in minimizing dystocia or eliminating it by birth weight control. And in terms of animal welfare, if we can have live calves born out of 97 to 99% of every cow that was bred, and those calves are vigorous when they hit the ground, they haven't suffered 2 hours of dystocia, and their brain has been depleted of oxygen for 30 minutes while that cord is pressed against the pelvic, and the heifer can get up instead of laying there and prolapsing, we've made animal welfare an important aspect within our operation. Within the Roundtable, we adopted the principles of the Beef Quality Assurance Program as the guiding information for producers. We have now included and support the transportation aspect, the transportation module with BQA, and that is the tool that we reference for beef producers that want to know how they can begin analyzing and doing self-assessment of their operation in terms of animal welfare. This one's unique to us. It's not really ever been something we're under the gun at the producer level. Stockers and cow-calf, very little influence in us. But you start moving up the beef supply chain and you get into Billy's world at the feedlots, you get into the next level at packer processors and retailers, this one is real. Injuries are real. But we all know how dangerous the world we live in with augers, PTOs on tractors, horses, cattle. So as an element of that, we decided this has to be something that we address and say that it is important with our industry that we take and train and try to prevent injuries at all levels in it. No, we're not going to match or have to match what the retailers are looking at, but yes, we have to train adequately. And most of us train right there on the ranch or farm with family or with mentors. And our young people learn as they're growing up. And we hope that it keeps them safe. But the other thing that happens is as we get employees, we've got to train them to our philosophy and to our standards of how we're going to interact with cattle, how we're going to interact with equipment, and make sure that their safety is foremost in our mind. Efficiency and yield is how the US Roundtable decided we were going to use that ugly word of profit. And it isn't amazing that corporations can talk about their profit and loss statement, they can talk about their quarterly profits, their quarterly revenues, their quarterly gross. But when a farmer or rancher mentions profit, by gosh, those greedy son of a guns, they think they ought to get a profit for growing my food? That ought to be a net zero, isn't it? But we knew that it was important. And so we named several things in here that's a part of our efficiency. And that's improved nutrition, reproduction, genetics, technologies, practices appropriate to operational goals and context. And again, I come back to us in this part where we're working with the live animal. And to us, gentle cattle is an absolute must for efficiency and yield. Because as those cattle move through the entire live part of the supply chain, there isn't anybody that takes them after us that wants to experience wild cattle. Billy feeding cattle, he does not like it when the guys are talking about cattle that when the truck comes up to the bunk, they hit the backside of the pen. The guys that have to pull cattle don't like pulling cattle that you have to put 20 in the alley to sort one out. And they're hard to handle. They're just proven not to be as beneficial. For safety purposes, gentle cattle. It's just a factor of it. we need to push nutrition as an efficiency to performance. If you have key performance indicators on your operation that you want to hit, nutrition is definitely a part of it. In our own operation, we don't feed. We simply supplement, and we supplement judiciously. We believe God made a cow perfect. And we'll put a lot of development and money into a yearling heifer, first calf heifer, but by the time they drop that second calf, we call them, you're on the payroll, girls. Now you go to the tough place. You go to the places that only mature cows can do some good at. All the young ones get the sweet feed. But that's how God made them. But it's our job to make sure that they have a tremendous amount of forage availability at all seasons, that they can survive a 3-foot blizzard, and that we meet them with the right nutrition so that their body is functioning properly, they have a highly active immune system, and that calf is also getting that immune system brought up, because one of the key indicators for us as our calves leave the ranch is that immune system is at peak. And we do that with working with nutritionists and building a product. This one was straight out of Crystal Licks, but we have tubs now that we use that are custom built for us. And we want those calves leaving the ranch in peak condition. The other thing that you guys provide us is our genetics. And here's where I think the most exciting changes and advancements are going to take place in the next 10 years as more and more commercial producers get into the field of genomics to try to get a baseline of what their operation looks like. We've got books that we can go back and, these were the EPDs of our bulls, and we can look at them all. We've got the papers in the file cabinet. But to us, genomics is going to give Brady and Aaron a baseline of where we are. And I think we're going to be a little surprised at what we think we have. And then when the data actually come back and you've got something real to look with, I think we're going to be really surprised. But I think we're going to be able to make more conscientious choices, both in line breeding in Red Angus and crossbreeding for heterosis, that will be more efficient in achieving an animal that fits our environment. For us, it's not about weaning weights. We look at weaning weights, we look at yearling weights. It's about profitability. And if in our environment with a 1,200-pound cow, if she can produce a calf that pays over the scale at 575 pounds, can we be profitable doing that? Can we create a business model that we can do that with? And that's about what our environment gives us. If we want 600 pounds, we're going to feed through that cow and attempt to put pounds on that calf, which is highly inefficient. To us, it is. So we're not going to do that. We're going to use genetics to move us forward and get more growth in those calves, as long as we keep our maternal traits, we keep our efficiencies and those key performance indicators that those cows have to meet every year, or it's goodbye, girl. There's no second chance for a cow that fails us. The elephant in the room, air and greenhouse gases. In 2019, a study said that U.S. agriculture is responsible for 10% of all U.S. greenhouse gases. Same study said that beef is responsible for 3% of those greenhouse gases. And we have some tools, and we have some great people working on it. And we're going to hear from Dr. Place later, but the folks up at Agnex, Dr. Mitloner at UC Davis, and beyond, they're all working hard at trying to find solutions where we can minimize some of the greenhouse gas. And whether we do it by direct treatment, I think some of the best tools we have is the other side of the table, which is never talked about. When they mention the 10% agriculture and 3% beef, they didn't mention what we give back to community. Yeah, we have that, but we keep healthy ecosystems functioning. And some of those reports slam us, because if we would take all the cattle off, well, we would make a net change by 3% of that 10%. We didn't make much progress, but we took a whole lot of high quality protein and other byproducts right off of those human and edible pastures. And so this is the part that is important to me, is what do we give back to society? And it's elevated when you look at what 1,000 days of protein does for the development of young people. The beef community uses a technology that produces high quality protein from solar energy locked within human and edible plants The technology produces a natural organic fertilizer, it's mobile without fossil fuels, and it self-replicates. And that's our cattle. And we are the original plant-based food. I got this slide from Dr. Place years ago, and as busy as it is, I love this slide because it talks about the importance, and I'm a beef advocate, but I'm an advocate of stopping nutrition deserts, whether it's domestically or whether it's outside of this country. But the fact that protein can reverse so many issues of stunting and underdevelopment in pregnant women and infants is incredible. And those are the factors, I think, are the weighing factors as we wrestle with this greenhouse gas, this carbon, the land use, land conversion issue. We have to take into consideration the positive side of that balance sheet. For some reason, in the beef conversation, it's only the liability side of the balance sheet we talk about. Let's get to talking about what it gives back to society. I wanted to give you an update. We just finished our 3-year strategic plan within the Roundtable. We do this every 3 years. And again, this is just a brief history of who we are. We're the cow-calf sector, the feed yard sector, the auction markets, packer processors, retail and food service, civil society, and allied industry. We've maintained our mission and vision statements through the entire process. We talk about them. We ask if we're still on target. Are we focusing on the right things? And time again, we agree we're right. We're in the right place with it. So over the years, we've been pretty aggressive. I thought we were pretty aggressive when on our first iteration and fresh out of the box and didn't really know what we were going to do, we decided we'd take on greenhouse gases. But we've never looked back, and we've always taken on the toughest challenges. But this is a little bit of a road history of where we've been and what we've got done and provided to the industry to try to help producers, try to guide, influence, but as a total supply chain, we each take on our own responsibility. Retailers have their responsibility, feeders have their responsibility, and cow-calf guys have theirs. But collectively, we work together to support each one of us. What's not shown in here is what we just finished this week. The goals working group met, the cow-calf side of the goals working group met. We met with Trust in Beef, which is a development out of drovers, and talked to them about surveying as large a cross-section of beef producers about grazing management plans, because our goal in 2023 is to have a baseline of how many grazing management plan, how many acres are managed under a grazing management plan in the U.S. And they have the capacity to get to a statistically large enough number that we can use that data to call it a baseline and a benchmark for where we go between now and moving forward with our ultimate goal. So these were the high-level goals for the entire beef supply chain. Is the U.S. beef supply chain will achieve climate neutrality by 2040. Under land resources, the U.S. beef supply chain will work to maintain and improve grazing lands under the care of U.S. beef producers. That includes BLM and federal lands as well. We don't want to leave those guys out. That may be some of the most critical area to show how good beef producers are doing on federal lands, how well they take care of it. In the water resource factor, by 2050, the supply chain will improve water management strategies and improve water quality. Under employee safety and well-being, we're committed to continuously improving the safety, development, and well-being of individuals working throughout the industry. Under animal health and well-being, the U.S. beef supply chain will continue to improve animal health and well-being. And under efficiency and yield, we will improve efficiencies, enhance product value, and increase demand, which collectively will enable operations and businesses to maintain and improve individual and community financial health. And community was something that was really important to us, because it doesn't matter how good we do at growing grass on the ranch. If we don't maintain that health in that community, we've got nothing. Because it's the community that supports us, that keeps us functioning while we help them keep functioning. It's a synergistic plan. So in our core strategies, we want to measure and report progress towards high priority indicator goals and sector targets that we've looked at. We want to drive adoption of sustainability practice at the producer level, at the packer processor level, and at the retailer level. Identify, facilitate, and support sustainable research priorities, and to that we're working with AgNext here in Colorado, with Mitt Lohner at UC Davis and others. Noble Research Foundation is working on a project. Nature Conservancy is working on a project. And ensure organizational success. We have to keep ourselves financially in a place where we can keep doing the work we're doing. So we're going to establish baselines for each goal and target. We'll develop data collection and housing capabilities by next year, which was a pretty important deal. Anytime you're collecting data from agriculture individuals, you have to respect their rights of privacy and their concerns about data getting out. So any of the data that we collect will be non-specific to any ranch. It will be amalgamated before it's ever finished so that no one individual ranch or operation can ever be identified through it, and we will house it outside of any agency. And annually evaluate outcomes of progress and stated timelines and make adjustments accordingly. So one of our objectives is 90% of the members of the US Roundtable supply chain will have adopted and implemented 2 or more sector-specific sustainability practice. And outside of that, 25% of US beef supply chain stakeholders, these are members or non-members, but these are producers and everybody outside of the roundtable, will have adopted 2 or more sector-specific sustainability practices. And that constitutes our continuing improvement. We want to believe in continuous improvement, that no matter how far we get, we can still get better. And we have forever. For 100 years, we've gotten better as we worked at things. So we want to measure and report progress towards our goals and targets. We want to grow credibility of the US Roundtable as a global leader in science-based sustainability and research. And we want our members to feel that they're receiving something from being a part of the roundtable. 70% of them should say, positively, I'm getting something for my investment. Organizational capacity and fundraising. And be a credible subject matter in science. And we're okay if we're using the science from academia. That's great. But we've got projects of our own that we're working on, and we want to contribute them. We do go through peer review process on our work. So these are our working groups: the goals, progress, recognition, feed sustainability task force, project and resource review, our outreach, communications and advertising, and then our General Assembly committee. So if you're interested, USRSB.org, or contact me. I'd be glad to visit with you about it. And this is what I think we're really looking forward to. These are the future land stewards. These are the future managers. These are the future advocates for this incredible industry. And that's what we work for on every day, to make sure that they have an opportunity to follow our footsteps. Thank you.